if we keep focusing on the problems, we will, but that will be the hole that we dig ourselves deeper and deeper into. There's a lot of negativity and hatred and a lot of bad things. If South Africa wants to be solution driven, the Orania model is a model that is open source. People can take it, they can change it as they want, they can chop it or they can add to it and use it for themselves.
Hello, my name is Donald, and welcome to the #1 media company, WorldView. At WorldView, we explore everyone's perspectives on all things that can broaden our worldview. Today, we're talking with Joost Strydom. Joost is, of course, the CEO of the Orania Beweging. Joost, welcome to the show.
Donald, thank you. It's a privilege to speak to you guys, and we're going to enjoy it. So, looking forward.
Now, this is definitely going to be an interesting conversation. So, Joost, a lot of people think they know what Orania is, or they don't really know what Orania is. But to clear the air, can you tell our viewers, what is Orania? Why was it founded?
Yeah, and that is one of the, you make a very important remark now, because Orania is one of those things that everyone has got an opinion on, but very few actually knows what it's about and why there is a place like Orania and actually how it works. So everyone has got some kind of an opinion, but it is important to get the facts straight, and for that reason, I'm thankful for this opportunity. Orania is simultaneously two things. It's the idea, and it's also a manifestation of an idea in terms of a reality, and it's a town. So what you can physically see is a town. The town is a normal town in the Northern Cape. It's got about 2,000 residents here, a little bit over 2,000. Last year's census, we were 2,000 souls. We grow rapidly, about 16.5% growth in population last year, 27.5% in new businesses last year. We have massive infrastructure growth and things like that. So that is the positive things that you can physically see in Orania. Obviously, Orania is one of those communities that is very unique because it is not like most other communities in South Africa and over the world for that matter. It's not founded because of an economic reason. It's not founded because of natural resources in a specific area like mines or whatnot. Orania is founded around an idea. So to clarify that a little bit, we must go back into the history of South Africa, and something I've repeated on many shows and many conversations, but it's important to keep repeating it because it's very important to understand. Orania is founded in 91 in terms of the actual buying of the town, but the idea is much older. In the late 70s, there were multiple groups, intellectual Afrikaner think tanks and whatnot, that started working around this idea of a let's call it an Afrikaner homeland. And the reason why they did it is because they were looking at the realities of South Africa, they're looking at the realities of the broader Africa, seeing that the winds of change, as they called it in the 60s, in terms of the colonial powers moving out of Africa, democracy becoming, kind of the standard of governments around Africa and so on. And they saw something very visionary. They saw that Afrikaners as a small minority at that stage in charge of South Africa in terms of the military, the economy, the politics, and everything in between, cannot keep on going that way in the first place. In the second place is Afrikaners is trying to rule over a united South Africa that was actually not united by us. We didn't unite South Africa in terms of the borders that it still currently has. It was done by the British government in 1910 after the Anglo-Boer War. Before that, South Africa was not a unit. It was not one thing. It was multiple things. You had republics, you had kingdoms, you had like almost like hunter-gathering groups. A very, very diverse South Africa in terms of management. Republics, as I said, kingdoms by the Zulus and so on. So not a standard, country that's ruled in one way. And the British Empire came and united it and managed it as the British Empire did in that stage, as a consolidated unit. Very easy to manage, very easy for business, very easy for logistics, makes sense in those terms, but it doesn't make sense in terms of the cultures of South Africa. It doesn't make sense if you are culturally inclined. It doesn't make sense if you want to manage your affairs in a cultural perspective. So what do we propose? Let me go back to the 70s, and as I said, Afrikaners were in charge of most everything, built on that system that was created by the British in 1910, right, predominantly, and followed by everyone after them. So here you have a massive central government ruling over the entirety of South Africa. You have certain ideas in terms of development. You have homelands, but still business is playing a major role in everything, and consolidation is a very important word. So first of all, these Afrikaner intellectuals, some of them specifically sociologists, said that we cannot continue this way. If we look at the migration of people, we look at the demographics of South Africa, this is not sustainable. This is not sustainable in the first place because the winds of change is going through Africa, and things are changing at a rapid pace. And even in the 70s, they knew what was going to happen in terms of the change in government in South Africa, just as it happened to our neighbors, Rhodesia, that became Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Angola, all the other African countries that pushed out colonialism and moved to a new system of government. So they saw that. On the other hand, they saw that survival of Afrikaners as a nation or as a folk or as a community is only sustainable with something that we call demographic politics, right, or concentration politics. The only way to make decisions for yourselves in terms of culture, language, religion, politics is to be concentrated in one place. That's the second thing. And the third thing is the idea that cheap labor became one of the major drive forces in South Africa as a political tool, right? Or maybe the other way around. So we had a system where cheap labor was always available, and very specifically black labor, right? So I think that's one of the things that a lot of South Africans are still quite angry about, is the fact that there were systems of labor created. Right? And that had to change for multiple reasons, which we can discuss further in a second. Now remember, this is why this is so visionary. This was not in reaction to 94 or 91 or Zuma's presidency or COVID or whatever. This was in the 70s, late 70s, early 80s, when these guys saw the future. They looked into their little crystal ball of migration statistics, of demographic statistics, looking at the rest of Africa, and they saw the only solution for us is, instead of giving everyone else a homeland, is to claim one for ourselves. And how do we do that? We do that by three foundational rules. The first one is we need to acquire a piece of land legally and through a formal process that cannot be disputed. Secondly, we need to build our own institutions, because on the one hand, they already had the vision to foresee that the state will, on the one hand, become more and more incompetent. If you look at ESCOM, SAA, and so on, and on the other hand, more and more antagonistic if you look at transformation agendas and so on. So those are the two realities, and to counter that, you need to build your own institutions. You need to build schools that function on your own accord. You need to build churches. You need to build socio-economic structures. You need to develop everything from chambers of commerce to economic drive forces to recreational structures, everything that you want to work for your community, from power to water to food, everything you need to take responsibility for. Just a side note, that doesn't mean that Orania has got fully, reached all those goals fully. It just means that Orania understands that whatever you want to have, doesn't matter if it's guaranteed in what constitution or whatever bill, doesn't mean anything if you cannot provide it for yourself. And the third thing, and this is the hard one, because on the one hand, our friends or other Afrikaners don't understand it. It's hard to learn it to them. On the other hand, our opposition doesn't understand it, because if they did understand it, to a large extent, they would think a bit different about Orania. And that's the idea of own labor, right? So our own labor, or eie arbeid as we call it in Afrikaans, is based on the following. First, Orania is probably the only community in South Africa that broke with the labor systems of apartheid. Nowhere else on the ground level for the normal person that works, that maybe lives in informal settlement, that works in a city, that has to take a taxi or a bicycle to work for multiple kilometers long before dawn, work the entire day in a garden or in a house, and come back at night. Very little change. The systems of labor did not change. Where you had, white areas that was protected by the police, now you have rich areas that's protected by fences in terms of estates, and there's no security police that takes your passport, but there is a security guard, private security guards that just takes your identity card or your thumbprint or whatever if you come into work, right? So that system of labor didn't change. Orania is maybe the only community in South Africa which actually broke with that idea of cheap systems of black labor and started doing all our own work, right? What does this mean? It means in Orania, in terms of labor, we do everything ourselves. We build our own houses, we clean our own toilets, we work in our own gardens, we clean our own streets, we take away our own rubbish, all that stigmatized type of jobs. We say we're not above those. We need to take responsibility for it ourselves as a community, right? So of course you can get someone from the community to cut your grass if you may be very busy or disabled or whatever, and you can't do it. But we encourage people to actually do it themselves on the one hand, and if not possible, to use someone out of the community and pay them a decent salary to do that. So that's very important in terms of the philosophical backbone of Orania, the idea of own labor. We cannot stress this enough because people still seems to not understand it. And that includes people that is critical about Orania, of course, as racist, and other Afrikaners who just can't fathom this idea of doing your own work. And I mean, that's a reality. It's not to be, condescending or whatever to some people. But if we want to look at solutions in South Africa, the idea of doing your own work is, labor is such an important divisive factor in South Africa. We need to rethink it. We need to think new. And that doesn't mean communism. It means taking responsibility. So that's maybe let's call it the philosophical or the political background. And that was formalized in multiple structures. Some of the ideas came from Sabra, which was at that time a think tank of intellectuals, and it manifested into Afstig, or the Afrikaner Vryheidsstichting, which is now known as the Orania Beweging. Orania Beweging is kind of the idea organization behind Orania, the architects of the idea, which designs and implements a lot of these things, working with different structures in Orania, be that the municipality or elected officials or whatever. It's also where I'm located, and that manifested in that way. Currently, the Orania Beweging is a membership organization, meaning we get members to donate to Orania monthly. They get certain advantages and so on. We very, 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 to a large extent, need those guys' support. So we got about just close to 7,000 members supporting the Orania movement on a monthly basis. There are certain advantages to them, but in the broad spectrum, it's just they want to support us. They want to see Orania developing. So, okay, so that is the theoretical background. Then the practical background is that there was a town that was created in the Verwoerd era by the Department of Water Affairs to house the workers on what is now known as the Kloofdam and the channel systems. The idea was to get the Orange River sustainable, and in doing so, they needed housing for the workers to actually build the channels, build the dams, and so on. And when the project stopped, the town was abandoned. It's not a lot of infrastructure. We developed a lot more over the years, but there was some infrastructure, and the town became a ghost town. Got in a very bad shape, and got available to buy. There was an advertisement in the Landbou Weekblad, and some guy saw it and started the process and bought the town. And since 1991, we deliver our own services, we grow our own economy, we do our own work, and we have our own place. So that is Orania in a nutshell.
That's fascinating. I always thought that Orania was born out of the end of apartheid, but like you were saying, the idea goes all the way back to the 1970s. But in terms of that membership, so are you saying there's more people supporting Orania than people actually reaping the benefits?
Yeah, that is the fantastic thing about Orania. And we always, I don't want to use the word market because it's not a sales pitch. But if we try to explain Orania to people, we don't want to, there's a lot of advantages if you live in Orania. It's a safe and prosperous community. It's lovely to live here, wonderful people, although it's extreme heat and extreme cold in the winter, very little rain, semi-desert environment and so on. It's really nice to live here because people are aligned. There are very few levels of separation. People are willing to sacrifice for another, help one another in emergency situations, help build, help create, and so on. But when we explain Orania to people, we always take the angle of what can you do for Orania? How can you help? Because, I mean, anybody wants to live in a functional municipality. Anyone wants to live in a safe area. Whether you be a starch capitalist or a communist to the worst degree, everyone wants that basic things like safety and security and safe place for their children. So we want to put Orania forward as the set of ideas that it is, and also you need to do your part. Orania asks a lot. Orania really do ask a lot. You know, it's not always you have to do your part. Let me just put it that way. And that's why it's so fantastic for us from the Orania movement to see record amounts of people actually joining the movement. They get very little benefits. There's little benefit in terms of, you know, when you come visit Orania, you pay a little less in terms of tourism accommodation, and there's some advantages. You get our communication, you get our membership, a magazine, and so on and so on. But the true benefit is, and that's why people buy into, is they're creating a place for Afrikaner children to grow up. They're creating a prosperous community, and they're actually donating to the cause and help us build out this community. And that is what's important to us. That's what's exciting for me, you know, the idea that people actually are ready and willing to give more. We also have the Help Some Funds, Helping Fund, maybe in English. It is an affiliate of the Orania movement, specifically focused on empowering Afrikaners. Our strategy was always, with the donations that we get, some Orania movement members give a certain sum of money every month to the Orania movement, and on top of that, a little bit more for the Helping Fund. And that money is used to empower people. So as I said, our strategy is not to give out food parcels and so on and so on. Sometimes in the emergencies, we do that, like in the early stages of the lockdown. Our focus is to empower people, putting them through preschool, putting them through school, getting bursaries for Afrikaner students that come and study at our technical training institution, empowering people with skills that they can help the next generation as well. Excuse me. So that is the strategy, and that's what we do with the donations now that we support. We also donate to infrastructure development projects. And in that sense, every member of the Orania movement actually contributes physically to the manifestation of the growth of Orania.
Yeah, that's interesting. But Joost, is Orania tied to the idea of a Volksstaat? What happened to the idea of a Volksstaat?
In the early years of Orania, that was a phrase that we used a lot, right? That phrase got a lot of bad publicity. And on the end, we stated that we know what our goal is, we know where we're going, but some people use that term in the wrong context, and that became a bit of a negative connotation. Yes, on the end, Orania's goal is to create a place for Afrikaners, to create a free geographical area for Afrikaners. As I believe there is ethically nothing wrong with, as long as we do not harm or do any trouble to anyone else. I believe freedom is not only to not be ruled over, it's also not to rule over anyone else that doesn't want to be ruled by you, if you understand. So that is part of the inherent idea that we connect to freedom. So maybe the phrase isn't used that much anymore. Orania hasn't abandoned the idea of a free place for Afrikaners, a geographical area where we are truly free. We haven't abandoned that idea. We are very much aligned with that still. But if we look at the history of South Africa as well, and the history of Orania, we had a certain concept in the early years of what will happen. I don't know how many guys actually know about the Musa Declaration, Goldie Musa's declaration in Parliament. I'm not sure if it was still in Mandela's Parliament or maybe in Mbeki's Parliament, where they actually put forward a declaration, a court of self-determination that, and I think the words phrasing goes something like, people just Google the Musa Declaration, goes something in the line of the pursuit for Afrikaner self-determination in the northwest part of the Northern Cape is a legitimate pursuit that actually passed Parliament, signed by Goldie Musa at that stage. So we had, a lot of hope. In that same time, or just a little bit after that, we spoke actually with President Mbeki, as we were speaking to many of the presidents of South Africa, including Nelson Mandela, Mbeki, Zuma, and so on. We always keep, connections to the government of South Africa. At that stage, Mbeki said something very interesting to the leadership of Orania. When we asked for larger amounts of physical freedom here and to actually be to a larger extent in control of our own destiny, he gave a very short and simple answer. He just said, "Show me the animal." And we didn't quite know what that meant, right? But in the end, we realized that it meant, show me a reality that I cannot deny, create a truth that I cannot deny. And that's the fact. Orania can only be successful if we follow our recipe of concentration politics. 2,000 people is not a lot. 16.5% growth is a lot. If we can continue that trajectory, soon we will be a majority. And that's the reason why Orania was chosen in a semi-desert area, an empty space where there's a very low population. The Northern Cape is not only the biggest, but also the lowest populated area in South Africa. That's why we chose it. We can be a majority, and without harming or making trouble with anyone else, we can create a space which is locally dominated by Afrikaners, where we can speak Afrikaans in our schools, where we can practice our Protestant faith, where we can build Afrikaner institutions and work on our own destiny. And I think that, in the end, is the most important thing. Concentration politics is our destiny.
And well, a lot of people obviously have a problem with crime in South Africa. Is Orania a safe place? How does policing work in Orania?
Yeah, very, very important question, because it's a very relevant question. One of the major reasons for migration through the ages, two things: economic opportunities and safety. And in a more and more unsafe South Africa, people want to know, is Orania safe? Do I actually put myself at risk for living there or what? So let me answer it from multiple contexts. Firstly, Orania is not crime-free. There's no place on earth that's crime-free. Every place on earth, to some extent, crime, be it very little, a lot, there's always crime. It's human nature. We are sinful humans, and that's the way it is. But Orania is, in the context of South African crime, especially violent crime, is quite a safe place. Why is it a safe place? It's not a safe place because we've got massively effective fascist policing industry that just beats down on everyone that moves. No, it's not the reason. Firstly, it starts with the idea of doing your own work. People's experience of inequality is something totally different. We have a shared and aligned vision, which means there's not a large degrees of jealousy between a worker and the employer, which mitigates crime. It's Afrikaners that works in different industries for other Afrikaners. Secondly, we project Orania's safety not as the effect of a centralized police force or something like that. We believe that every member, every citizen, every person living here share the responsibility of helping to keep Orania safe. The community needs to be vigilant, and if every member of the community is vigilant, all on the lookout, constantly making sure that the community is safe, it's something totally different than 2 or 3 police officers working on their own, trying to control and dominate an area. So that is, from the beginning, our point of view. First, our own labor policies. Second, everybody is responsible. Third, we've got our safety and security strategy. in terms of a formal company that is in control of our safety and security, Orania Veiligheidsdienste, which is a private security company, legal, professional, qualified as any other private security company in South Africa. Only difference being their main concern is not to make money. Their main concern is to keep the community safe. It's not a business, although we use certain business ideas in order to make sure that the company is sustainable. It needs to stand on its own feet because of the fact that Orania gets zero funding, municipal funding from the state or from anyone else. We need to make something that's commercializable in terms of servicing the broader area as well. And in that terms, make some money that we can use to upgrade our systems. So Orania is safe. One day, something will happen in Orania as things happen, and there will be like massive, front page news. Orania is not as safe as they said, or something like that. And we can then refer back to this conversation where I said, no place on earth is 100% safe. But Orania is in the context of South Africa an extremely safe place. Of course, people take responsibility. Can something bad happen? Obviously, it can. Will the community absolutely react to it? Yes, they will. They will take that responsibility. People are voluntarily willing to do what's needed to keep the community safe in terms of whatever. And at such an extent that Orania has been on multiple occasions asked by the police in the greater district for help. For assistance with things, because we have got capable individuals, capable tools that can help to keep the border region stable and safe as well.
That's interesting. But just can one still purchase in Orania? Is there still places to purchase in Orania? How does a person join Orania?
No. So that's a question I'm going to answer in 3 parts. I'm going to start at the beginning. Normally, a lot of people, although it's not compulsory, I want to stress very much, it's not compulsory to be a member of the Orania movement to come and live here. But the logical process for a lot of people is to join the Orania movement as a donating member and then start with the verblijfsrecht or right to residency process. But it's not needed, and you don't have to do it. It's just, as I said, a logical step for a lot of people. Secondly, people go through the process. The process has got 2 parts. One is the right to residency. The other one is just the basic town orientation. And the right to residency work as follows. The goal is to keep it a culture-oriented town. Remember, in an era where Afrikaners is vividly accused of being racist on the basis of the skin color and things like that, Orania is not a community that says we are a white community. We are an Afrikaner community, which means if you're a Russian or a Pole or a Hungarian or whatever, and you want to come and live here because you think it's a community and you qualify because you're white, that's not the case. Orania is an Afrikaner community, and people who want to live here needs to be culturally integrated into the community. I think it has happened. There has been people from European countries that really went above and beyond to integrate into Afrikaner culture. It has happened, but in the end, the verblijfsrecht committee, their work is to make sure Orania stays a cultural community. There's other things that's important to us, such as religion, such as culture, such as language. So then you go through that process. That's firstly an administrative process. We do a criminal background check, and if you had a parking ticket in 1982 and you have a criminal record for that, I mean, obviously it's not going to disqualify you, but if you want it for murder or rape or massive drug trade or something like that 2 weeks ago and there's still a court notice in your name, we're not going to grant you that right. Then you go through a process, the administrative process in terms of, are you aligned with our vision, or are you just coming for the benefits of Orania? I mean, you can't really test that, but we want people to know we're culturally inclined, we're proud of our history, our religion, and so on and so on. And do you associate yourself with this? And I always say the following. In moving to Orania, in going through this process, there's 3 role players, right? The first is the person that's moving here. Do you actually want to live in Orania? Do you align yourself with our vision? If you do, I mean, or let's say if you don't, no one can force you to come and live in Orania, and you should not Oh, well, there's some people who've tested our process, which were not aligned at all. And then we just sent them the letter, go through the process if you want to. But if you truly want to live here and you're truly aligned with the vision, you're the first rule player. The second one is the administrative process in terms of the interview. There's a small interview, and you fill in some forms and so on. And the third is the community. The community always has a say. I mean, a community can make you feel welcome or unwelcome. I mean, that's the point. But for the rest, you go through that process. You speak to normal, everyday man on the street, people from Orania, a small committee that's formed to make sure you're aligned with everything. And when you go through that, there's an orientation of 2 days, telling you the political history of Orania, why the idea of own labor is important, how does things work, how does safety work, how does rubbish removal work, how does basic municipal service delivery work, and so on and so on. And then you move here and you start your business or whatever you want to do. So that's basically the process in a very, very short explanation about that.
So just to be clear, a black person or a colored person or an Indian can join Orania as long as he is an Afrikaner or he is willing to embrace what it is to be an Afrikaner.
No, that's a complicated question which one cannot expect a simple answer for. I think if I try to simplify the answer, anyone can apply to live in Orania. But we must remember that culture is not only a language, it's not only one aspect of the entire culture, right? So I've never let me give you a good example. Orania's got a agreement, a memorandum of understanding with the Xhosa community, Mnyameni in the Eastern Cape. And what happened there is they want to be less sufficient on the government, on the ANC. They want to be more self-sufficient and so on. It's a totally Xhosa community, 100% Xhosa community. I enjoy going there. I enjoy liaising with them. Wonderful people, very much driven in terms of self-determination, very positive. They've learned a lot of things from Orania in terms of our banking system and things like that we use. I've never wanted to go and live there myself. Firstly, I don't want to go through their initiation processes. There's a lot of things I can't speak Xhosa, and I am not a Xhosa. I think it would not be justified for me to go and live there because I am not a Xhosa. So I think that's the answer to some extent, right? So there have been black people or people from different countries, Europeans, white Europeans, that wanted to apply to live in Orania, and all of them are treated the same way. They sent we send them the application forms for the right to live here, and they can go through the process and in good faith explain their case to the committee. But in the end, as I said, being an Afrikaner is something with historical connections, with a shared history, and so on and so on.
Mm. Yes. How does education work in Orania? I saw a very interesting documentary where I believe they separate at a certain age the children in terms of like creativity or logistical skills. It's very interesting how education works. And you tell us how education works in Orania.
We're not there yet. I think that's maybe the Finnish model that I think we could definitely embrace to an extent. Very, very interesting. What Orania have is 2 school systems. And there can be more in the future, I guess. Currently we have 2, both are primary and secondary schools. But it's totally diverse systems. The one is the typical school system as we know it in South Africa, kind of the school system of the English origin. Uniforms, discipline, and the normal kind of things. It's a CFO school, and they're the biggest school of the 2, and they got, for a population of just over 2,000, they've got 480 children in school, so it's quite big. Also, a lot of people from the broader region that comes here because of good opportunities in sport and culture and so on. So that's more your normal schooling system. And then we've got a bit of an alternative schooling system as well, in terms of full school Orania, which is a child-driven schooling system. So how it works is the child takes responsibility for the subjects for the week, right? So if I come in on Monday morning, I'm not in the mood for Afrikaans, I do my math. or if I'm not in the mood for math, I do my science. But on Friday, I need to check with a teacher that everything is done for the week. So I can either get a equal sign for all my subjects, meaning I'm up to date, or I can get a minus if I'm behind schedule, or I can get a plus if I'm a week ahead of some of my subjects. And that could win me a ticket to go home earlier the next week, right? So there's some bit of incentive to work harder. And that is totally self-discipline driven system. The teachers are only there for assistance. There aren't classes, except if you want something to be specifically explained, but you work on your pace with your discipline, meaning that both children that needs a bit of extra attention and children that are extraordinarily gifted can actually work on their own pace and fare very, very well. Yeah, but in terms of curriculum, the law requires you to follow the national curriculum, obviously. So we do that. We don't take anything away from that because our matric is valid as any other child in South Africa's matric certificate. And you can study anywhere, even internationally, with that, obviously. But we add on, we put some extra material to the curriculum in terms of our own history, which is not represented in the South African curriculum, obviously, all that well anymore. We add a bit of religious studies, we add a bit of history, as I said, and so on and so on. So we don't take anything away, and a child has the full qualification as any other child in the South African school, but we do add a bit. We do add a bit.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, and very productive. You're teaching the child to become independent, but you can do that because these are private schools. That's why you have so much independence.
Yeah, both schools are private, and that helps a lot. We like to follow in all instances in Orania the idea of becoming less dependent on the state for things like financial. Any financial structures, or municipal level, school level, anything. We rather do something that takes a bit longer, but we do it ourselves with our own funding, or with donations, or with some plan that we made, rather than be dependent on the state. And that's quite tough, you know. Sometimes you are you really would like to have some state money to just do things a bit faster, but we have to be consistent on that to, as far as possible, only use our own resources.
Yeah, and on that note, on state overreach, has there been attempts to squash the idea of Orania by the state? Right? How do you maintain your general independence?
Very interestingly, one of the main things that's now relevant with the news stories of recently is Orania's municipal status, which was the state wanted to deny it when they changed to the wall-to-wall municipal systems in 2000. And there was actually a high court case about it. But the state, I don't think they took it very seriously. It was a little town, 300 people in the year 2000, very small town. And they were busy with bigger things, you know. They didn't take this court case of Orania's municipal status very serious. But when they opened their eyes, it was like a few days before the election, and the court just said, listen, if this is not settled, the election can't continue because there's a municipality which is the status of the municipality is unclear. We can't. The entire country's municipal election in 2000 would be postponed, and obviously nobody wanted that. And we settled with the state outside of court, granting Orania a totally unique and to a large extent independent municipality. So we have 0 political representatives in our municipality. We have elected officials that's directly elected by the people. I don't vote for a party, I vote for a person. If I want that person to represent me there, I vote for him specifically by name. I don't vote for a party that can go in a coalition on, you know, elect someone again or whatever. We vote specifically for people. I think that's fantastic. It's a new system. I think the entire South Africa should be run on a much more localized political system, but let's leave that there for a second. So that was one of the major things that turned into a major important victory and milestone for Orania's municipal elections and management, giving us a lot of local freedom. Now, to go back to your question, we've seen a lot of attacks on Orania status, but never from government officials, always from, or never from the people who practically work with Orania, right? Who practically liaise with us, always from opportunistic politicians who wants to make a point. Because, you know, the officials from municipalities and from provinces and so, they see that Orania is succeeding, you know. They see that we are doing something right. They are either positive about the fact that our administration is always correct and up to date, or they're positive about the possible things that they can learn from Orania. But, you know, opportunistic populist politicians, they're a bit of a problem. Luckily, they just attack us with their mouths and media, and most of the time that's harmless. They just give us more publicity.
Yeah, I want to throw one idea to you to play devil's advocate. Is Orania doing well because your principles are correct, or is it doing well because South Africa is doing so badly?
Very important question. I think one of my main wishes would be to see South Africa that's functioning very well, a South Africa that is a success, but at the same breath, Orania still also functioning well, it's also a success. That would be something that I would very much like. A good proof of Orania's success would be if there's a successful South Africa where different communities take responsibility for themselves, and Orania is still a success. And I think that is the case to a large extent, and I think it's possible because people are mostly, or I would like to believe, that people are mostly not motivated by the negatives in life. They are motivated by the positives. Orania's got a lot to offer.
Yeah.
Obviously.
So the reason why I brought that question up.
Do you want to say something?
The reason why I brought that question up, Joost, is it seems like your policies are not very competitive. Like the idea of everyone working for himself, right? So why would a South African stay in Orania and pay, I don't know, 15,000 Rand for private security, when you can stay in South Africa and pay 3,000 Rand? So once again, why I brought that question up is because you don't really have any competition at the moment because South Africa is struggling so much. But if South Africa got the story, if they sort of things out, that might change for you.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure about the 15,000, 3,000 comparison, because I think we pay a very, very small people security in Orania, but that led there. I think the question here is, what do Orania want to achieve? We have a certain set of principles that we actually want to build out and empower ourselves into. So if South Africa is a success, or there are other communities that are successful, it's a positive thing for Orania, because the incentive to move to Orania then isn't, well, Orania Safe and it has job opportunities, which it is and which it had, but the incentive then is, I'm aligning with these principles. So it would be very good for us if that is the case. If South Africa is functional, we would very much like it. If South Africa is functional, there are other communities, so people can voluntarily go where they want to or where they feel most at home. That the logical flow out of that would be that people who will feel welcome in Orania and align themselves with our values would come here. So that would really be a good thing.
Okay, fair enough. So do you know of the Suidlanders and what they are trying to achieve? Is there an argument to be made that you can make a sort of a confederacy of South Africa, sort of states that support Afrikanerdom, that support each other? They don't have to be in one location. They can be in various locations in South Africa, but they can help each other, like the Suidlanders and Orania are helping each other.
Orania's view is that South Africa would be successful if there's a community of communities. If on local level people take responsibility for themselves, but on a broader level, people liaise, people trade, people exchange, whether that be goods or ideas or politics or whatever. So we are very much pro people who take responsibility for themselves. Orania is in no sense, in terms of our existence, built out of, the ideas of war and violence and so on. We are built on the idea of good relationships. So yes, I think there's always opportunities, and people would be surprised to see who we liaise with. We have spoken to representatives of the Suidlanders. We don't have a formal agreement with them, but we've also spoken to representatives of, for example, Nyameni. We've spoken to people like Kusatu. We've spoken to all the presidents of South Africa, excluded President Ramaphosa. We've spoken to multiple political, semi-political, and other organizations, because we, as a community, would like recognition, and the way to get recognition is to give recognition. So we are, that idea of a South Africa that's built on communities and institutions, it's a very positive development for us. And we're excited to liaise with people. We can always liaise with people, and you should always speak your mind with friend and foe alike. I think anybody in South Africa can name the goals and the ideas that the EFF has, but I'm not sure that all the EFF supporters truly understand what Orania is about. That means we need to make our message clearer. We need to be heard. We need to go ahead and tell everyone exactly what we want to do, why we want to do it, and how we are doing it. And the how is by taking responsibility. So we encourage other communities of every shape and size and level to take up that responsibility, and we will support people who will support themselves as well.
So, Joost, what does the future hold for Orania? Do you have plans to expand? Or do you have plans to buy more land? What does the future hold for Orania?
If you look back at Orania's history, and you see that even with a bit of a slow start, we went into the past 7 years where we had an average of 10% population growth every year, where we had an average of growth in our education sectors, in our development, and so on. The future is very promising. The idea is, well, currently on the current piece of land that we own, we can house up to 30,000 people if we densely populate it. Although our short to medium term plan is to develop something like a city in an understandable context, something like a city where Afrikaners with specialized skills can find a place where they can work and live, because a lot of Afrikaners are specialized people in terms of their occupations. So we want to house skill sets here and create a city type environment, but also we don't want to be too densely populated, because we want to keep this idea of like a rural city, plattelands. We Afrikaners like the platteland. So we want to keep and promote that. So we can settle anywhere between 10 and 30,000 people on our current land. We do have plans to buy more and expand as we are growing at the pace where that will become necessary very soon. We have massive infrastructure developments at this stage. Our sewage plantation, currently we are building a sewage plantation that that's built in 3 phases. The first phase can accommodate 3,000 people, second one 7,000, the final phase 10,000 people. It's infrastructure we're developing with our own money, our own skills, and our own people. We're currently working on a solar farm. It's a humble beginning, but as all things in Orania is, we encourage people to take responsibility for themselves. We're also developing a central solution for the community in terms of a solar farm, which is also going to be built in 3 phases. First, just basic generation of power. Secondly, generation of power and possibly selling to third parties anywhere in the country. And thirdly, the ability to store other electricity that we can have for at least from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. every day of our own power supply. So that's some of the infrastructure projects that's going on. Yes, as I said, our primary focus now is infrastructure, because we have enough space to grow a few times our current size. Also, we keep in mind that we might need to buy more land, and for that we will plan and execute as necessary. But currently, our focus is firstly and foremost the infrastructure development, to house the large amount of people that want to move here, but also to create a stable environment, even if state institutions fail.
Yeah, that's interesting, and it sounds exciting. But just, I see our time is running out. believe you've easily answered all our viewers' questions. I want to give you one last opportunity to add, plug, or say anything that you want to.
Thank you. That is a nice open card to play. Thank you for that. Well, firstly, thank you for the opportunity to be on the show. And if there's more questions, people are welcome to direct it to our webpage or our Facebook page or social media on the Telegram or whatever they find us on. But let me just lastly state this. South Africa has got a lot of problems, and a lot of people are focusing on those problems, whether that be economic, whether that be inequality, whether that be whatever, failing institutions, whatever. If we keep focusing on the problems, we will, but that will be the hole that we dig ourselves deeper and deeper into. There's a lot of negativity and hatred and a lot of bad things. If South Africa wants to be solution driven, the Orania model is a model that is open source. People can take it, they can change it as they want, they can chop it or they can add to it and use it for themselves. Inherently, the Orania model is take responsibility for yourself. It's culturally based, so take the things that your culture has to offer and use that. If your culture has strengths, use that. If your culture has weaknesses, make sure that you plan for that. But it's a cultural-based community. So be solution-driven, be culture-orientated, and liaise with friend and foe alike. As I said, state what you want to do, state how you're going to do it. Speak to other minority groups in South Africa, minority nations, such as Orania is doing with the Khoisan and so on. Do not be afraid to clearly state what your plans are. But if you want to build a long-term, sustainable community, you have to do it with land that you legally acquired. You have to do it with institutions, and that's the hard work. That's really tough. And it asks a lot from volunteers. And thirdly, you need to do it with your own labor. That is universally applicable to every cultural group in South Africa. It's usable by anyone and any continent in the world. Do those things, take responsibility for yourselves, and you will see that the value of your quality of life, although you work very hard, quality of life is really good. And finally, you're working towards a community that's at peace with itself and that's got very low levels of internal friction. And what more can one ask for?
Well, thank you. It's a very positive message to end up on. And to our viewers, if you've made it this far, you most certainly enjoyed our content. So please consider liking this video, sharing it as widely as possible, and subscribing to our channel. My name is Donald, and you've been watching WorldView.